talking about the biggest stories that matter to you the most. Breaking news, John Calipari is finalizing a 5-year deal to become the Arkansas Razorbacks' next head coach, covering college sports like no one else. The biggest guests in sports. We now welcome in Hall of Famer Jim Calhoun.
Such a pride I had, I came to connect.
The legend, Tim Tebow, joins us.
We'll run it back. I like it.
The legend, Herschel Walker. Welcome in, everybody. Little Tuesday night edition, Aaron Torres Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Torres. Hope everybody's doing well. Hope everybody's having a great day. And if you can hear that pep in my step, we are done with the look at like we had 6 months where we didn't really have much to react to. And now the news is flowing fast and furious. And we got so much to get into. So I will say this. Normally, the Tuesday night, Wednesday morning show will be a look ahead to the weekend ahead. This week's a little bit different, though. We got some Monday night college football. We got Billy Napier chirping at his own fans. So it's going to be a little bit of a hodgepodge episode of the Aaron Torres Pod. Today, we are going to start with Florida State. They are not very good. I think there's a very clear reason why. And we're going to discuss what is going wrong and if it is all fixable this year and beyond. From there, we will talk about those Billy Napier comments because I don't know who is advising this guy. I would not recommend going after his fans, only that is exactly what he did on Tuesday. So we'll discuss that. And oh, by the way, we will start to look ahead to the weekend in college football. 2 games that I'm really excited about this coming weekend: Texas at Michigan, Colorado at Nebraska. We will preview them. By the way, we will hit on some of the other big games probably on Friday's show, the Arkansas-Oklahoma State game, Oregon-Boise, Kentucky-South Carolina. We'll also do our college football betting show, which is on college football betting. Aaron Torres, you can just search that. It's a separate show we do every week. So we got plenty of football. This is kind of a little bit of a midweek deal where we're kind of looking back, but we're looking ahead. Before we get started, quick reminder. Make sure you're subscribed here to the Aaron Torres Pod. So many of you have found us in the last few months. We cannot thank you all enough for your support. Just past 43,000 subscribers on YouTube. If you're not subscribed, click the button at the bottom of the screen so you know when we're going live every single day. Also turn on those notifications. By the way, also available on podcast, Apple, Spotify, wherever you get podcasts, you can find us there. Leave a 5-star rating and review. That would really help. Social media. At Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram. And we do have, listen, I got a professional Facebook page where we post clips and all sorts of stuff from this show. So make sure, click that link as well. Make sure you're following on Facebook as well for clips to this show. Before we get started, one more announcement. So fired up. I've told you over the last couple of days, we have ourselves a new presenting partner. So fired up. It is Collie Puffs and ColliePuffs.com. Okay, so listen, so many of you are parents and grandparents, or you're just like me. You're a guy that's spending a lot of time on the couch watching football. And here's the thing this time of year, when you're on the couch watching 14 hours of football every Saturday, you're looking for a delicious snack to chew on, but also something that's healthy. And that is what that is right there, Collie Puffs and ColliePuffs.com. Okay, so Collie Puffs, it is an American-owned company not far from where I live. Founders basically were sitting there saying, we got small children. How do we create? They go for the unhealthy stuff every day when they come home from school. How do we create a healthy snack that they enjoy eating, but is also good for them? So they created Collie Puffs. This is the alternative to all the unhealthy stuff that you see in your snack food aisle. It's baked, not fried, avocado oil, healthy ingredients, but they still taste delicious. I told you they sent us a box a few weeks ago. The Torres family ripped through them. Me, Mrs. T, couple fell on the floor. My dog was going crazy for them. So you have to check these out. For more information, try them. Visit ColliePuffs.com. They are also available on Amazon as well. So you can go ahead and get your, you can purchase them there. If you're already on Amazon anyway, everybody's on that website every freaking day. Throw some Collie Puffs in your cart and try them. Tell them Torres sent you. I promise you this. I would never endorse something that I don't use and eat and would use myself. Collie Puffs are awesome. I love them, and I know you will too. With that said, There is no more time to waste. It's that time of year. September, football's in the air. There's so much to react to. So let's go ahead and get to the topic of the day. And the topic of the day, listen, here's the bottom line, is as I said a minute ago, most Tuesday night, Wednesday shows, we're going to start looking ahead to what's coming the following weekend. It's not often that we get Monday night college football, but we got to go ahead and react to what happened in Tallahassee on Monday because it was a debacle of epic proportions. If you remember last year, Monday night, Labor Day weekend, Clemson gets stunned by Duke. I'll put this up there as just as stunning as Florida State coming off that season opening loss to Georgia Tech in Dublin. They're back at home. You think they're going to be okay. They're playing Boston College, first-year head coach Bill O'Brien. What could possibly go wrong? Well, as it turns out, everything went wrong. Final score in this one, 28-13. Florida State didn't just lose. Florida State got absolutely embarrassed in this game as Florida State accounts for just 293 yards of total offense. Boston College runs all over them. And it's funny, because I remember a week ago, after the Georgia Tech loss, everybody said it's the 12-team playoff era. You can't overreact. You got plenty of time to figure things out. Well, as it turns out, it is overreaction time in Tallahassee because Florida State isn't just 0-2. They are 0-2 in the ACC, and even in a league that will almost certainly get an automatic bid to the 12-team college football playoff, Florida State has dug themselves a hole that they simply probably almost certainly will not be able to get out of. And so when I look at this Florida State team, what's wrong? First of all, let's give Boston College their props. Bill O'Brien, as I said, first-year head coach. You know, I'm a child of the Northeast. When I was at UConn, went to a lot of Boston College games during that Matt Ryan era. That is a city that will support Boston College if they're good. Some of my best times, some of my funnest memories, some memories that I kind of forgot that night happened at that stadium. So I'm happy for Boston College and its fans. But the bottom line, this is about Florida State. And when I look at Florida State, to me, there are two huge issues that are indisputable. We are now through 2 games for Florida State. I know it's only week 1, but we're through 2 games for them. And there are 2 issues that are not going away. It's the line play and it's the quarterback play. And let's go ahead and dive in. And so when we talk, let's start with the line play because it's funny. Again, a week ago, I remember talking about Florida State and I had people in the comments saying, Torres, you're overreacting. It's 1 loss. But what did I say after the Georgia Tech game? I said there are certain things that if you lose are fixable, right? If you have a quarterback that normally completes 73% of his passes and he goes, 14 of 36 with 3 interceptions, that's fixable. That's a bad day. But when you get beat up on both lines of scrimmage against Georgia Tech, it wasn't something that was going to be solved. But here's the crazy part. It actually got worse on Monday night because these stats are absolutely incredible. As I mentioned, Boston College, 369 yards of total offense, 263 yards rushing for Boston College. This is a team. This is a program that we have been told, people in the media were saying it's the best defensive line of college football. Sure doesn't look like that because they got punked by Boston College. Boston College, to its credit, they do have a running quarterback in Castellanos. He's a very talented player. I remember watching him a year ago. But this is on Florida State. Again, Boston College, I think, has a pretty good O-line. I've been told they actually invest most of their limited NIL money in the offensive line. It doesn't change the fact that Florida State should never be this bad up front against anybody, let alone Boston College. 369 yards of total offense, and again, 263 yards rushing at Doak Campbell Stadium. Here's the problem, though. It ain't just the defensive line, it's the offensive line, because how about this? Florida State, 21 carries for 21 rushing yards on 16 carries in this game. And so both lines aren't very good, but at least the offensive line, let me defend them a little bit. The reason the offensive line can't block is because there is no threat of a downfield passing game with DJU. And listen, one thing I'll say, I don't like criticizing any individual. It's a team game, 22 starters. But at the end of the day, this is the NIL era, okay? And I'm not going to feel guilty if a well-compensated player is not living up to expectations in this era. And so when I look at DJU, this was 7-8 years ago. I'd probably bite my tongue and, it's a team problem. And how are they going to solve it? No. This falls on the quarterback because on Monday night, 21 of 42 passing, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. We all saw, especially in the first half, he's overthrowing everybody. He's got guys wide open in the end zone. He's throwing it 5 feet over their head. That is on him. And I'm not going to feel bad because bluntly, there are a lot. He's well compensated. There are a lot of people relying on him. I was thinking about this. We know that a good quarterback in the NIL era, because Matt Rule said it at a press conference last year. He said a good quarterback in the NIL era is going to go for $1 million. That's the going rate for a good quarterback. And so I was thinking about this. There's a possibility DJU is the second highest paid player in that Florida State football building. People are counting on him. People are relying on him. People literally have invested in him, and he ain't living up to his end of the bargain. And as we talked about after the Georgia Tech game, there is no doubt that as you realize that DJU can't beat you downfield, you can load the box, limits the run game, and it turns into a disaster, the likes of which we are seeing right now. And so Florida State is not good. And let's just, listen, we don't need to, I don't want to say overreact, but look at the schedule. They still have Miami. I'm sorry, they ain't beating Miami, especially on the road. Clemson, we can criticize Clemson. At least Clemson looked half decent against Georgia. You look at some of these other games. Memphis next week ain't a guarantee, and SMU ain't a guarantee in a few weeks as well. Notre Dame on the schedule still. So this could get really ugly really quick for Florida State. And when I was thinking about Florida State, one more thing before we move on to the rest of a very busy show. I do think there is a very important lesson and a very interesting lesson about roster building with these Florida State Seminoles. Because the bottom line is you look at college football, right? You look at college football, and for about the last 100 years or so, there's been a pretty clear way to build a college football roster. You recruit your butt off, you bring in a bunch of elite players, you develop them, you coach them up, and you hope that a bunch of them hit. And then, oh, by the way, you got to do it year after year after year after year after year after year. And then maybe someday you get to a Georgia roster, an Oregon roster, a Texas roster, a whatever. But it's mostly through the high school ranks. You look at most of the best teams in college football. They ain't taking 25, 30 transfers in offseason. I'm not saying Florida State has. But Florida State is an interesting example of what can happen when you either can't recruit high school or you lean too heavily in the portal. Florida State under Mike Norvell, this is kind of a crazy stat. They have never had a top 10 recruiting class under Mike Norvell. Now, in his defense, they had pretty much a top 5 class late last year. A couple kids flipped, including KJ Bolden, who was awesome for Georgia in their opener. He ended up at Georgia. But I just bring it up because he has not recruited those elite high school players. And so because of it, they have gone heavier in the portal than most other schools. And now listen, I understand that when you're taking over a program, it's what you got to do. It's what Colorado has to do. It's what USC had to do under Lincoln Riley, Brian Kelly under LSU at LSU. But at the same time, when you rely so heavily on the portal, it's like anything else. Giveth and taketh away. Like I was thinking about this. Florida State last year, and to their credit, they have crushed the portal. But you look at last year, Florida State had a team that went healthy. Listen, they were one of the 4 to 5 best teams. That's indisputable. You could debate should they have been in, should they have been out, healthy, not healthy. When they had Jordan Travis, they destroyed LSU and destroyed pretty much everyone on their schedule, okay? But at the same time, they lose 10 players to the NFL draft. Here's the kind of crazy part, is that of those 10 players, I think I counted 9 of them came to Florida State through the transfer portal. Jared Verse transferred from Albany, first-round pick, Los Angeles Rams. Keon Coleman transferred from Michigan State, second-round pick, Buffalo Bills. Braden Fisk, second-round pick, transferred in. Johnny Wilson, number 2 wide receiver, transferred in. Jordan Travis, he was at FSU for 3 or 4 years, but he transferred starting his career at Louisville. And so why I bring it up, when you rely that heavily on the portal, 2 things happen. One, you're not building the depth that you need to sustain when you lose a bunch of NFL guys. But 2, you're kind of at the mercy of the portal, right? And so the idea that every single year the portal is going to produce the same amount of talent And beyond that, that you're going to be able to get the same amount of talent. It's just so hit or miss. You just never know. And I think it's going to get even more interesting over these next couple years because of the fact that the COVID senior year is getting taken away. Now, I know there's talk about adding a fifth year, whatever. But you look at the portal, think about so many of the big names that entered the portal this year. DJU, Cam Ward, Will Howard. These are fifth-year seniors, guys that normally wouldn't have this extra year of eligibility. So to me, it's going to get harder and harder to recruit from the portal. But I think Florida State, this should be an eye-opener. You can't rely every year on the portal, and you can't rely every year and hope and expect to land 4, 5, 6 NFL dudes out of that portal. And so I look at Florida State, I feel bad, but this ain't pretty, and I just don't see how it's getting any better. You got to develop internally. By the way, Jordan Travis was your starter for 3 years. You couldn't find a backup, obviously, as we saw late last season. There wasn't a backup on that roster that was suited to play. You got to rely on the portal. You got to rely on DJU. Some of this is on DJU, but a lot of it is on Mike Norvell as well. Listen, there's a lot of Mike Norvell slander in the social media streets these days. I'm not as anti-Mike Norvell as most, but this is a dangerous game that he's been playing with the portal. I think this year is the year that he got burned. All right, so Florida State stinks. We just talked about them. Let's go ahead and talk about another team in the state of Florida that absolutely is not very good, and that is Florida State's rival, the Florida Gators. So Florida, listen, we spent most of the Sunday reaction show, and if you missed it, by the way, we appreciate the support. We had a lot of you tune in on a Sunday afternoon on a holiday weekend to our week one reactions. Most podcast downloads we've had in months on Monday morning, thanks to you guys. So we appreciate your support. But we talked about Florida, and this isn't going to be a let's revisit a ton of the Miami game, and in the second quarter this happened, in the third quarter that happened, whatever. But Florida is not good. They were disappointing. We talked about it. It was a game where they needed to show out. And even if you lose, but it's a great game, even if it's a 27-24 final score and you lose on a last-second field goal, you have to give your fan base hope if you're Florida, because there hasn't been a lot of positives over the first 2 years of this Billy Napier regime. Unfortunately, the exact opposite happens. You don't only lose, you get embarrassed. It's ugly. Miami, who is also being coached by a third-year head coach, is just leaps and bounds more talented than you. And it was just nasty all around, okay? So it was bad. We talked about it. But Billy Napier certainly did himself no favors. Like everybody else, he has the Monday morning, Monday afternoon media availability where he kind of looks back on the previous week but starts to look ahead to the next opponent. Florida has Samford this weekend. You certainly hope they take care of business. But he was asked about what had to change after last week. Here is what he had to say.
And I think we got to become a more consistent team, and we have to execute better. And if we can focus on those things and not necessarily what some guy in his basement saying in, rural Central Florida on social media, then we got a chance to get better, right? So.
Not a good look, Billy Napier. Not a good look. Got a lot of thoughts on this. First of all, shout out to all the Florida fans that actually pointed this out to me. Not a lot of basements in rural Central Florida. Don't love you calling out the fans. But talk about not knowing a fan base. There's no basements in rural Central Florida because of the hurricanes and the rain. So people were making fun of Billy Napier for not even knowing what life in Florida is actually like. But let me just say this. Billy Napier has enough problems. Calling out the fans certainly didn't help. I think this is a terrible, terrible look for Billy Napier. Now, in terms of the whole situation, there's a couple things. First off, I don't believe you should ever be calling out your fans, okay? Because, listen, I get it. There's cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs people all over the internet. I hear from them every day. You think I don't get told I suck every day? You think I don't get told that I need to do whatever, whatever. I'm not going to get into what I get told every day. But I get told it. I know your players get told it. I know you're in your mentions it isn't pretty. But you have to ignore it. But here's the other thing. The fans, let me even backtrack. I'm just not in favor of ever criticizing your fans. There is never an upside. It's all downside. And those crazy Florida fans, and when I say crazy, I mean that in a positive way, they're the ones that allow you to make $7 million a year to coach football, okay? Listen, you want to go make $40K a year and have no stress and have people not tweeting at you? Go coach high school football. Listen, no disrespect. I know Billy Napier's dad is a legendary high school football coach. But when you step into the SEC, you know what those expectations are. When you take the Florida job, you know what the expectations are. When you sign a contract that pays you $7 million a year and allows you to hire 742 support staff members, you know what those expectations are. And again, it's the fans that are helping support that crazy staff that you put together, NIL and your salary alone. But here is where I have real issue with what Billy Napier said. The fans were not the problem on Saturday. As a matter of fact, the fans were awesome on Saturday. Now, listen, I'm not a fan, as I said, of ever criticizing the fan base. But like I sort of get the Eli Drinkwitz a few weeks ago, hey, I want to see this place filled. I know it's Murray State, but let's fill this place up. I'm not saying I think it's smart, but I get where he's saying, hey, come support your team. You know who didn't have a problem filling up the stadium and getting support on Saturday? It was the Florida Gators. I looked it up before the game. The get-in price to get the cheapest ticket in that stadium, it's like $175. So you think about a family of four, and I'm not trying to do the whole cliche family, but think about it. But you bring four people to that stadium. We're talking minimum just in tickets, $600-700. Then you're talking parking, tailgate, gas, food, grill, charcoal, whatever you're doing. Hopefully you brought some Collie Puffs with you for your tailgate. But the point is that beer, whatever. Then you get to the stadium. It's 1,000 degrees. You're buying bottles of water. The fans were not the problem. The fans were actually awesome. You had 90,000 people, the vast majority wearing blue, yelling and screaming, fired up, ready to go. And if they weren't fired up, Tim Tebow fired them up, Javon Curse fired them up. Like, the fans were actually awesome. And so to call them out, to somehow say that they are the problem in this situation, no, Billy Napier, your lousy football team is the problem. The team that you have put together with your players on the same time frame as Mario Cristobal. Mario Cristobal got the same job that you got the job the same time you did. Mario Cristobal players are better. They were more prepared. By the way, it wasn't the fans' fault that your players kept committing dumb penalties late in drives that kept people on the field. Not the fans' fault that guys are hitting the quarterback after he's gotten rid of the ball. Not your fans' fault that your defensive line is getting pushed 8 yards in the backfield when Miami wants to run the football. So to me, it is such a bad look. And I do think, I hate to say it, I'm not rooting against Billy Napier. If you've been listening to this show, there's been a lot of negativity with Florida, but it's because it's a negative state of mind right now. I'm not rooting against him. You know how good it is for my business if Florida's really good? Are you kidding me? Florida's got one of the biggest fan bases in the country, as we're learning right now. And so this idea that, like, I don't want Billy Napier or Florida to be fired, but I'm also not going to let him get away with calling out his fans. I just thought it was a bad look, and it was interesting because when I shared the video on my social media feed at Aaron_Torres, a lot of you know who was the most vocal about this besides Florida fans? It was Tennessee fans that said, "Hey, when things got bad with Butch Jones, we used to start hearing stuff like this." It was other fan bases that were like, "Oh, I have seen this before. It never ends well." And to me, that's the theme of this conversation. Don't call out your fans. It's not going to end well. They support you. You need them in your corner. Now, we'll see what happens going forward. You got to beat Stanford this weekend. And then you got to beat Texas A&M. And like, I'm actually curious what that fan base, especially after what Billy Napier said on Monday, how they respond against Texas A&M. I credit all the people that spent all that money to come to the stadium, but that was a bad look for Billy Napier. I don't think that's acceptable. I just don't. And I'm not a high horse guy. I'm not perfect. I say dumb stuff all the time, but criticism is part of the job. I'm lucky enough to have this mic and a platform and a platform where maybe a couple people a day care about what I have to say, but I got to deal with the consequences of not everybody's going to agree with me. Billy Napier, you got the privilege of coaching football, making $7 million a year in the toughest conference in college football. You got to take the good with the bad. You got to avoid the noise on social media, and you cannot criticize your fans. All right, so what I want to do, take a quick break, come back. When we come back, we're going to start to look ahead to week 2 of the college football season. Listen, Tuesday will be our normal look ahead day, but there was just so much that we had to react to from the last couple of days. But we're still going to go ahead and check out the Texas-Michigan game, the Colorado-Nebraska game. If you have any questions, drop them in the comment section. We'll get to them at the end of the show. Quick break. Be right back. Before we do, many of you ask me all the time, Torres, what can I do to help support the show? You give me hours and hours and hours of content every single week. What can I do to help you? Well, I'll tell you what, do me a quick favor. Check out the Aaron Torres Media merchandise store for all of your team-specific shirts, hats, and more, all available at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. A lot of you wondering, Torres, what can I get in that merch store? Well, first of all, we got our brand new Hope and Pope Kentucky basketball t-shirts. That's right. Mark Pope has arrived. He is here to save the day. Get your Hope and Pope t-shirts there. Also, Arkansas fans, the Big Pig Invasion is here. You can get your tees there. Basketball School Alabama shirts. Mora Hurley 2024 UConn shirts for your tailgates at Rentschler Field, your games at the XL Center or Gamble. And oh, by the way, your Mike effing Woodson gear for Indiana. If you love football, we got you covered too. We got more Dion shirts and hats than we even know what to do with. The freeze warning has hit the plains. Auburn fans, grab your freeze warning tees now. And of course, our new era, new rules shirt applies to Nebraska football and its incredible fan base. We have more coming for the fall, plenty in stock right now. So make sure to check out the Aaron Torres Media merch store at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. And you can always hit me up with any questions. Aaron Torres Podcast Questions @gmail.com. All right, everybody. All right, back. Good to be back. So see that the chat is humming. We're going to get to some of your questions and comments at the end of the show. Should mention, by the way, we're going to preview a couple of the marquee games on tonight's show, but I promise you we will get to some of the other big ones in the coming day or so. We're going to preview Kentucky, South Carolina. We're going to preview Arkansas, Oklahoma State. We're going to preview Boise, Oregon. So we got plenty of football ahead. This is going to be a football show here for pretty much the next 2.5 months till basketball ramps up. So buckle in. Again, we appreciate your support. And again, the Tuesday night show would be the normal show where we start to go full speed ahead into the weekend. Had to talk a little DJU in Florida. Had to talk a little bit of Florida and Billy Napier as well. With that said, do want to go ahead and switch gears and start to look ahead to the big ones on Saturday. The first one, let me just say this. My buddy Cole Kublik calls this a helmet game because when you see these two helmets, you just want to run through a brick freaking wall. It is, of course, listen, I think we've all been excited about this one since the day last season ended. Texas at Michigan, noon Eastern, Big Fox, Gus, Joel, and Jenny. Texas, though, on the road, a 7.5 point favorite in this game. The over-under set at 43.5. By the way, we're recording this on Tuesday night, so if you're watching on Friday, don't yell at me if the lines have moved. You get the point. In terms of this game, I actually want to start with Texas, okay? I think both these teams kind of a little bit off the radar in week one. Maybe you didn't get to watch them closely. I watched them closely so you didn't have to, so you could enjoy your team and your tailgating whenever you were doing on Saturday. Let's start with Texas, though. Texas, I thought, was quietly very impressive in a 52-0 win over Colorado State. And I know what a lot of you think. Listen, we see all these scores. You know, Ole Miss put up 76 and Mississippi State put up this much and Auburn beat Alabama A&M 73-3. And all these big scores kind of run together. But Colorado State's not a terrible team. Colorado State finished 5-7 last year. We saw them choke against Colorado, so they probably should have been 6-6. Not a great team. Not elite. Not the best team that's ever taken the field, but not awful. And Texas just jumped on them and did not let up. In terms of the game, listen, I think everybody's going to focus on the offense. Quinn Ewers looked good. Quinn Ewers was so good that we got our first extended Arch Manning experience. Arch Manning with a touchdown pass. So it was pretty cool to see all that. But what actually stood out to me was the defense for Texas in this game. Texas is playing a Colorado State team that, again, they weren't perfect, but Colorado State, Jay Norvell can score points, okay? Well, Colorado State in this game finished with under 200 yards of total offense and a pass offense that last year ranked in the top 10 nationally, finished with 74 total yards passing. And so, again, I know the focus is going to be on Quinn Ewers. It's going to be on Arch Manning. I think it should probably be a little bit more on that defense because I was one of these guys. I wasn't sold. They lost two really good defensive linemen up front, Devondre Sweat, second-round pick, Byron Murphy, first-round pick. And I said, is that defense potentially going to take a half a step back? No, it's only Colorado State, but thought they actually looked pretty good. From the Michigan perspective, if you did not watch this game, this was the NBC Saturday night game. It was the same time as A&M Notre Dame, so maybe you weren't paying super close attention. Very interesting game, very interesting result. Think there were some positives and certainly some negatives as well. Michigan wins 30-10 against Fresno State. But what was interesting, if you paid close attention, score in this game was 16-10. Midway through the fourth quarter, midway through the fourth quarter, Michigan puts in a touchdown. Then Will Johnson, the All-American cornerback, picks six. All of a sudden, it's 30-10, and you think it's a blowout. It was not a blowout, and it was not one-sided. With Michigan, I think there's some positives, but I think there's some negatives. Positive, defense is still elite. And last year, listen, we think about J.J. McCarthy, we think about Blake Corum. That was one of the top 2 or 3 defenses in college football, and they slowed down everybody they played straight through Washington and Michael Penix in the national championship game. Now, they obviously lost a bunch of talent, but they also bring back a bunch of talent, and that's part of what's going to make this game interesting. I think you could legitimately argue Michigan has as good a personnel on the defensive side of the football as anybody that Texas is going to play this year. That sounds crazy because they got Georgia on the schedule. They got some other big SEC games, but Michigan's got dudes. Will Johnson's a first-round pick. Mason Graham is as good of an interior defensive player as there is. And so Michigan, their defense looked good. What I thought was actually very interesting, if you watch this one closely, and I think Texas actually did a little bit of this as well. Michigan seemed to go out of its way. Michigan almost treated that game like a preseason game, even though they could have lost it, from the perspective of it seemed as though they went above and beyond to make sure that they kind of created depth internally in their program. What do I mean by that? What I mean is that there were times where their starters weren't on the field and nobody could really figure out why. I turn it on middle of the second quarter. Will Johnson, who I've mentioned a couple times here, he's standing on the sidelines and they throw to the sideline and they say, is he injured? Is he this? He didn't go to the tent. What does it mean? And I think we just found out after the game, Sharon Moore just wants to get dudes reps because we're entering this 12-team playoff era. You're going to have potentially 4 to 5 postseason games, potentially 17 games overall. So when Michigan doesn't look great in certain spots, I kind of give them a pass because I say, well, wait a second now. Were they trying to put up the most possible points and win in the prettiest fashion? Are they trying to build some depth and kind of get ready for what could be a 17-game season if all goes right? Negatives for Michigan, though. And we talked about them on our Sunday afternoon recap show. Quarterback position is not figured out, okay? And I mentioned this on Sunday. I have a people in the program, sources, if you want to call them that, whatever. And what I could tell you, they went into fall camp hoping that last year's backup, Alex Orji, who we saw in certain spots subbing for J.J. McCarthy, they were hoping that he was going to step up, be the dude, and be the starter on opening night of the season. Didn't happen. Wasn't good enough, wasn't accurate enough. So Davis Warren, a former walk-on, kind of crazy. This is a guy who has survived cancer, which is obviously terrifying, but very happy to hear. He was the one who actually started this game. Alex Orji got snaps and whatever, but it doesn't change the fact that, in my opinion, it's not good that it's week 2, you're bringing in Texas, and you don't really have the quarterback situation figured out. So that's what happened last week. In terms of this week, in terms of the game, let's look ahead. So I'll be blunt. I was thinking about this. This is one of the few games. Doesn't it feel like we all kind of know how it's going to play out from the perspective of what both teams want to do. Like, there are games that just don't go to plan at all. Think about USC, LSU. Think about Florida, Miami. Probably we thought was going to be closer than it was. This game, very obviously, Michigan wants to control the line of scrimmage, control the trenches, run the football, chew down the clock, and keep Texas's offense off the field. Steve Sarkisian talked about it during his press conference on Monday. He basically said, look, this is almost like an NFL game in terms of the number of possessions that we expect to have, the number of snaps that we expect to take, and we have to take advantage when we have the football. So Michigan's going to try to slow down this game. They're going to try to eliminate, they're going to try to eliminate possessions, what I just said. Texas, of course, is the opposite. They want to score early. They want to make Michigan fall behind and make them rely on the passing game, because I don't even think Michigan really believes in the passing game right now. So that's obviously what's going to happen. I'm curious to see who dictates it more. But when I start to look at this game as far as a pick and a betting pick, and for people who are new to this show, I always give out my betting pick, whether it's an actual game pick or not. In other words, sometimes I'll take the over-under, sometimes I'll take the spread, and then I'll give you what I think the final score is going to be. So in terms of this game, if I had to make a betting pick, I think the pick is very obvious. It's the under of 43.5. Because when I look at this game, listen, I do think Texas is going to win. But at the same time, when I look at this game, I think Texas could win 24-10. I think they could win 24-3. I think they could win, as crazy as it sounds, 14-3. But I also think there's a scenario where Michigan can win. Defense forces a couple turnovers. Quinn Ewers faces the best defensive front that he's faced all year, that he will face all year. The O-line, which Texas has maybe the best O-line in the country, finally meets their match up front at Michigan. And I could see the scenario where they lose a low-scoring game. Michigan gets out early. Quinn Ewers throws a couple picks. All of a sudden, Michigan walks out with a 14-10 win. The one thing that I cannot see, and by the way, you could clip this off and make fun of me if I'm wrong on this on next week. I can't see the scenario where this becomes a shootout. I can't see the scenario where this turns into a 37-34 type game, because I just don't think Michigan has the firepower. I think there's a scenario where Texas breaks a few plays and all of a sudden they put up 24 points, but I can't see Michigan going score for score at them. So give me an official pick of my best bet being the under 43.5. If I have to take a side, I'll take Texas to win. I'm going to say 20-14. Like I said, I think it's going to be low scoring. It's going to be possession by possession. I'll take Texas to win, but my official best bet, I'll give all my picks out on Wednesday on AaronTorresOnline.com. But official pick is the under of 43.5. Let's keep it going. Let's get to the other big game on Saturday. And it is a game. If you are a child of the 90s, like I am, this is one you are going to love. Colorado at Nebraska, Saturday night. This is that NBC primetime game, 7:30 Eastern. Nebraska, a 7.5-point favorite. The over-under set at 57.5. It's going to be a fun one. I know that I'm fired up. I know that you all are fired up as well. Let's talk about these two teams. I want to start with Colorado. And if you listen to Thursday night's post-game show, we talked a lot about Colorado. I did not see the Colorado game the same way as everybody else did, because everybody else on social media, all I saw was, Colorado's the same team as a year ago. Shadour's amazing. Travis Hunter's amazing. Everybody else stinks. The defense stinks. The O-line stinks. It's not really how I saw it at all. Colorado wins, 36-28, I think 31-26 was the final score. They win 31-26. To me, there was one narrative that I believed was accurate, but there was one narrative that I didn't believe was accurate about Colorado. What I believe is accurate, the O-line to me maybe has improved, but not to the level where it needs to be for Colorado to be elite all season long. Colorado, we know what happened last year, and I guess to the credit of the offensive line, they only gave up 1 sack. Last year, Colorado gave up 56 sacks, which is an insane number for a 12-game season. But Colorado, I did not think was good enough along the offensive line. Added a bunch of really high-level transfers. Jordan Seaton comes in as a 5-star. But what concerned me, they gave Shedeur time in the pocket. That's obviously good news. But what concerns me is that there were those 2 or 3 times a game where they had to pick up a yard on the ground and they simply couldn't do it. There was the 4th down play early in the game, couldn't get a yard. Late in the game, needed a yard or 2, couldn't get it. And so I know Coach Prime kind of said all the right things. Hey, we took what they gave us, but that does concern me. The one place, though, that I fundamentally disagree with people, I felt like I was watching a different game than everybody else, was the Colorado defense. And look, are they the 85 Bears? Are they the 2022 Georgia Bulldogs? Probably not. That defense looks very improved to me. And again, you had to watch the game. Wasn't perfect. Early in the game, North Dakota State hit a couple slants. Early in the game, North Dakota State's quarterback, Cam Miller, got loose a couple times. But if you watch the game, middle of the second quarter, things calmed down. And then, by the way, Colorado committed a couple stupid penalties that kept North Dakota State drives alive. But second half, North Dakota State did not score until like the final 5 minutes of the game. And it's funny, I looked it up just to make sure I wasn't missing anything. North Dakota State finished with like 440 yards of total offense. That sounds like a lot. But if you actually go back, they got 88 yards on the final drive. Remember, they had to score, Colorado's in the prevent defense, whatever. They got 88 yards on the final drive. They got 49 yards on the final play, the Hail Mary that fell just short. So you finished with 449 yards. A tenth of them came on the final play of the game. About a quarter of them came on the final series of the game. And Colorado, outside of that, gave up like 350 yards of total offense. Not perfect, but not terrible. And the other thing is, though, the defensive front actually played really well. Yes, North Dakota State's quarterback got loose a couple times, but North Dakota State really, outside of the quarterback, could not run the football. So the defense, to me, is better than people are giving it credit for, even if I think the O-line needs some work. In terms of their opponent, Nebraska, let me just say this, Nebraska fans, and I've said it a million times, I'm a child of the 90s. It's been a tough couple of years for Nebraska. This is the first time it feels real. There's been years, there's peaks and flows, ebbs and valleys. You've won, not recently, but even under Bo Pelini, you won 9 games, but it didn't feel real, sustainable. This feels freaking real, okay? Dylan Raiola comes in, number 1 recruit in America. We know the story. His dad played there. His uncle coaches there. Flips from Georgia right before National Signing Day. He gets named the starter. Nebraska finishes with over 200 yards of total, 200 yards passing, 200 yards rushing. Raiola finishes with about 250 yards passing himself, 500 yards of total offense, as I just said. The defense looks elite. And most importantly, I talked about the Colorado sack totals. Nebraska's bugaboo last year was turnovers. This is a wild stat. Nebraska turned the ball over 31 times last year. That doesn't include the fumbles that they recovered, including about 5 or 6 against Colorado last year. I think they turned it over 5 times against Colorado, maybe fumbled 6 or 7 times. 1 turnover for Nebraska. If they can take care of the football, they're going to win a lot of games this year. Now, in terms of the game itself, on Saturday night, first of all, the crowd's going to be amazing. Nebraska fans, they've showed out for a lot of bad football. They are going to be loud and ready to go. I think this one is a little bit more close and competitive than people think. First off, from the Colorado has the ball, Nebraska doesn't. Think it's interesting. Last year, Nebraska lost in large part because they turned the ball over too much. But Shedeur still cooked. Shedeur had about 400 yards passing in that game. And so if you look at Nebraska, this was a top 10 defense a year ago, top 20 defense nationally a year ago. But if there was one question that they had, the secondary wasn't great, about 40, 41, 42 nationally in pass defense. That's not bad, but compared to the run defense, it was really, really, really good. And so when I look at Colorado, that is a team that can throw the ball all over the field. And if secondary and defensive back play is your weakness, that has to be a concern, especially because Colorado cooked you last year. And I think Colorado is probably a little bit better in the passing game in 2024. So that's the positive. The negative, I don't know how Colorado is going to run the football. Colorado, to me, I need to see it from the O-line. It's no disrespect, and maybe they're great in pass blocking, but you're not going to be able to survive the season if you cannot consistently run the football. That's not rocket science. You understand that, whatever. So Colorado, I believe, will be able to get those big chunk plays. They really largely moved the ball at will against North Dakota State. Remember, even that North Dakota State game, there was the weird kicked interception on the goal line. That's at least another 3, maybe 7 points. I think Colorado's going to be able to move the ball at least through the air. I'll also say this from the Nebraska perspective. It went perfect last Saturday. I am not trying to disparage or make Nebraska fans feel bad about a 40-7 win, where my only concern with Nebraska is pretty straightforward. Everybody's talking about, well, how good was North Dakota State, Colorado, barely. Well, here's the same thing. It's the same thing for Nebraska. That UTEP team that they played is not good. They won 3 games last year, fired their coach, first-year head coach. They got like 3 starters back from last year. UTEP is not very good. And so I think it's going to be a little bit more competitive. I see a lot of people, Nebraska's going to blow them out. Colorado's a disaster. One, I'm curious, can Nebraska establish the run early? Because I do think that Colorado defensive front is good. And obviously Dylan Raiola, first big-time game. He's a big-time player. He models himself after Patrick Mahomes, wears number 15. But what's also interesting, remember, Colorado really, the only time they got burned in the run game last week was a running quarterback. Raiola isn't going to run the football because he's the franchise, and Matt Rule's not getting him killed in week 2 against Colorado. So to me, I think Nebraska's maybe a little bit more conservative than they were in the previous week. I think that Colorado defense is a little bit better than people think. My official best bet, I think this over-under is way too high. This, to me, feels like a game that will be won in the 20s. Now, listen, Nebraska could break a few big plays. Nebraska could, 1 play, 85 yards, 2 plays, 62 yards, whatever. But I don't think this is just a shootout back and forth. Nebraska won't allow it to happen. And this, to me, feels like a game in the 20s. So my actual best bet, I know it's not exciting. 57.5 to me is way too much. I'll take the under a 57.5. I don't feel great about picking this game as far as a winner and a loser because I think Colorado with those wide receivers can pull the upset. Will they? I don't know, but they got the more experienced quarterback, the more explosive playmakers. Defense isn't as good as Nebraska's. I'm not going to pretend it is. I can see Nebraska pulling off Colorado pulling off the upset. I'll take Nebraska to win. I would lean a Colorado cover, but I think Nebraska or the under 57.5 is the best bet. I'll say Nebraska 27-24. Don't feel great about it. May change it by the end of the week, but my official best bet pick is the under of 57.5. Fun show today. Producer Matt, do we have any questions, comments that we need to get to before we get out of here? We can go back to some of the Florida DJU stuff, whatever, if need be. But let me know if there's anything interesting worth noting. Mark says, the fans are right to go after Billy Napier. He's way over his head, and the guy who hired him needs to go. It was a terrible hire from the get-go. So Mark brings up a very interesting point, one that I brought up on social media on Saturday that Florida fans have really kind of rallied around, is you look at the Florida situation. What makes it worse for Florida is the AD that hired Billy Napier is also the AD that hired Dan Mullen. And by the way, there's a lot of Dan Mullen discourse of, they should have never fired Dan Mullen. That's another conversation for another day. But Mark brings up the interesting point of, wait a second now. Scott Strickland, the AD, we cannot let this guy make a hire. Now, we talked about this on the Sunday afternoon recap show. The dynamics behind the scenes at Florida are really interesting. School president steps aside. There's an interim school president. And so as an interim school president, if things really go sideways, is the interim school president going to have the guts to fire both the AD and the football coach? Because I don't think that the board is going to fire Billy Napier, pay him $26 million, and let Scott Strickland make the hire. Where I would be interested, this is where you got to watch out. Forget Billy Napier. I think you got to fire Scott Strickland first if you're going to fire Billy Napier. And so to me, it becomes interesting. If it's mid-October and Florida's 2-4 or whatever, with that tough 6-7 game stretch coming up to end the year, and Scott Strickland's out, then Billy Napier might as well start packing up the office. But that's the interesting part. Is an interim school president going to have the guts to fire an AD and a football coach? Because I just don't think you can fire Billy Napier. By the way, we don't root for people to get fired on this show, but it's like I said a minute ago. I'm not one of those. I don't talk about another man's job. If you're not good at your job, you get paid a lot of money. Deal with it. To me, those are the interesting dynamics at play at Florida, where they're trying to figure out, okay, like what the heck are we doing as an organization? Because at the end of the day, they're going to have to get rid of a football coach as well as a school president as well. Anything else? They need Deion. Let's start the Deion to Florida rumors. It's funny, man. You know, one week I get told Deion's the worst coach that's ever lived. The next week I'm told he has to be the next Florida coach. He has to be the next Florida State coach. Paul Feinbaum's giving him the USC job, even though Lincoln Riley's like, you know, an 800% win percentage coach. I will say with Deion, it'll be so interesting to me. I believe him when he says that he wants to stay at Colorado post Shador. But if they win big this year, one of those big jobs is going to come after him. And if they don't win big this year, I think he's going to look around and say, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to pour my blood, sweat, and tears? I believe he will keep doing it. But that is interesting. Deion to Florida State. Get it going right now. By the way, I'm joking about the Florida State stuff. Mike Norvell is nowhere near a hot seat after a 13-1 ACC championship season. But it is crazy. Deion, one day everybody says he's the worst thing walking. The next day they're giving me all the jobs that he should take the head coaching job for. Let's keep it going. It's these same people in Florida basements that sent death threats to Jim McElwain. Listen, here's the bottom line. Every fan base has their nuts, okay? Has their kooks. And if you do send something threatening, I'll just say this. Maybe it makes me unpopular. Maybe it makes me soft. You send something truly threatening, I have no problem with an administration, with a coach, with a broadcaster like myself going to the authorities. You slide into my DMs and you say, I'm coming for you and your family. I'm probably going to take that to the authorities, okay? But what I will also say, there are angry fans in every fan base. Listen, I'm a UConn alum, okay? UConn's been pretty good at basketball the last couple of years. But have them go on a losing streak of 2 games out of 3. People get mad. People say dumb stuff on social media. For 99% of America, there's no consequences to saying dumb stuff on social media. And beyond that, not only is there no consequences, they're on social media in the emotion of a game. And so, yeah, I'm sure there have been threats. If it's that serious, then whoever it is, Jim McElwain, Billy Napier, Scott Strickland, Aaron Torres, Dabo Swinney, go to the authorities. But there are also just people that are angry, and I'm sorry. If you are not living up to expectations as a $7 million a year head coach, it's not my fault that you're not doing your job. I'm not saying we should excuse awful behavior. What I am also saying is be better, win some games that matter. Don't get embarrassed by Miami, a rival who also has a third-year head coach. So that's my kind of take on Florida fans. None of them are perfect. I don't think there is a win for Billy Napier in criticizing and calling out his fan base. Brad, a lot of Florida stuff today. Great comments. Appreciate everybody. Brad says, this is simple. Billy is not good enough. The issue is why Scott Strickland does not care. I think Scott Strickland cares. First of all, Billy Napier has shown me nothing to believe that he is good enough. And that's the thing, right? Is that I've been critical of Billy Napier because it's not just that he loses games. He loses games that he is not supposed to lose. We've talked about it. I mentioned this the other day, but I have a buddy who's like, it's the administration's fault at Florida. I'm like, the administration didn't lose to Arkansas last year in Arkansas's only SEC win. The administration didn't lose to Vanderbilt in year 1. The administration didn't give up 328 yards rushing against Kentucky and about 10 yards per carry to Ray Davis a year ago. The administration didn't get punked by Miami on the field on Saturday. And so I don't believe Billy Napier is good enough. He has yet to show me anything that proves that he is. I don't think you can say it's year 3. He needs more time when Mario Cristobal is awesome, when Lincoln Riley just picked up a big win, etc. Yeah, I don't think there's really an excuse. By the way, Brent Venables, I was critical of Brent Venables. He looks awesome in year 3. I think Scott Strickland cares. I think what he's doing is trying to hide, because if he hides and they can't, like there's a lot for Scott Strickland on the line on this one as well. Of course, Scott Strickland is going to support Billy Napier because the alternative is saying he's not good enough. And if he's not good enough, he was your hire, and you're basically admitting that your hire wasn't good enough. And again, you will probably not be allowed to make another hire. So it's an interesting time at Florida. But I'll just keep going back to what I've said a few times. You can't. If you're Billy Napier, you simply cannot. You simply cannot call out your fans. There is no upside to this at all. And the more you call out your fans, the worse you look, the harder it is to build any type of positivity with your program. It's just a bad look overall. All right, I'll tell you what. I think it is time for me to get out of here. I do think it is time for me to get out of here. Appreciate everybody's support. The numbers are going up, like I said, great couple days of podcast downloads. And the one thing I will tell you, a couple things. First of all, as you can see on the screen, we are presented by Collie Puffs, the healthy alternative to snacking. They are delicious, but they are healthy. When you are sitting on the couch for 12 hours a day on Saturday, order some Collie Puffs. You can get them at colliepuffs.com. Also available on Amazon. So you're on Amazon buying all sorts of quirky stuff anyway. I don't even want to know what's in that Amazon shopping cart, but you can get Collie Puffs there as well. But as I said, we're full speed ahead. We're talking all things college football into college basketball season. I appreciate you guys finding this channel. We haven't talked a ton of college football in June, July, and August, but you're showing up, and this channel is going to be fire over the next couple months. If you are not subscribed, please make sure to do so. Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Music, wherever you listen to podcasts, please make sure to subscribe. Also, make sure to rate and review the show. Go ahead, give us a quick 5 stars. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, all that good stuff. Make sure you're following on social media at Aaron_Torres on Twitter, at Aaron Torres Pod on Instagram. We gave you the Facebook handle. I got a Facebook page. We're going to be posting some clips, extra stuff on, so make sure you're following there. And I think that's it. We'll be back. Full episode on Thursday night. We'll start to look ahead to the other big games of week 2. I do want to talk Arkansas, Oklahoma State. That's all of a sudden a very interesting game coming off that dominant win by Arkansas, Kentucky, South Carolina, and some of the other big games as well. Time for me to go. Appreciate everybody's support. I'm going to get the heck out of here. Shout out to Torrent. Shout out to Rachel, who hates my voice. Shout out to JJ Reddick, UF Head. Unblock me, bro. If you're not subscribed here, make sure to do so. Appreciate you. We will be back. Full episode Thursday, unless something crazy happens tomorrow. Never know what's going to happen on a Wednesday in college football season. We'll be back.